Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live without fear? Not the absence of fear itself, but the liberation from being controlled by it? Have you imagined a life where you don't constantly worry about what others think of you, where their judgments and opinions no longer dictate your choices? Maybe you're exhausted from wearing different masks in different situations. The professional mask at work, the perfect parent mask at home, the agreeable friend who never rocks the boat. Perhaps you've realized that the more you try to be what everyone else wants, the less you recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. But let me tell you something that few are willing to admit. As long as you live for external validation, you will remain a prisoner of others' expectations. As long as you fear showing your authentic self, you will continue to live a fractured existence, seemingly whole on the outside, but hollow and disconnected within. Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existential philosophy, said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, and herein lies the paradox. What appears to constrain you is actually the doorway to your liberation. The discomfort you feel when being true to yourself isn't a warning to retreat. It's an invitation to break through. It's not about becoming someone new or improved. It's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you. It's about shedding the layers of conditioning, social programming, and false beliefs that have accumulated over a lifetime. If you've made it this far, it's not by chance. This message is for you who feels that gnawing emptiness despite outward success. It's for you who senses there must be more to life than this endless performance. I want to show you that there is another way of being, but it requires facing uncomfortable truths that may initially sting. Yet, unlike the pain of inauthenticity that slowly kills you from within, this discomfort will finally set you free. Let's begin the journey. You believe that what makes life difficult lies outside yourself, in demanding bosses, unsupportive partners, societal pressures, or economic circumstances. The same mind that created limiting narratives can craft expansive ones. The power has always been yours. You just forgot how to access it. As long as you believe that happiness and fulfillment depend on controlling how others perceive and treat you, you remain at the mercy of what you cannot control. Your freedom begins the moment you realize that authentic living isn't about eliminating external challenges. It's about developing an unshakable internal foundation that allows you to respond rather than react. What you resist within yourself controls you far more than any external force ever could. The parts of yourself that you've labeled as unacceptable, the emotions you've deemed too messy, the truths you've deemed too threatening, these are not your enemies. They are messengers carrying vital information about your authentic needs and values. And this is precisely where we need to look deeper, into the shadow self, the disowned aspects of your being that continue to operate beneath the surface, influencing your life in ways you don't yet recognize. If this message resonates with something deep within you, click the subscribe button and join this journey toward authentic living. Your support allows us to continue creating content that matters. The most pervasive illusion of modern life is that you are your conscious thoughts and carefully curated self-image. You've been taught to identify with the narrator in your head, the social roles you play, the achievements on your resume. But what if I told you that's merely the tip of the iceberg? Beneath the surface of conscious awareness lies a vast territory of impulses, instincts, repressed emotions, and primal wisdom that Carl Jung called the shadow. Not because it's inherently dark or malevolent, but because it contains everything you've pushed out of the light of consciousness. Jung famously stated, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This insight reveals why you may feel like a passive participant in your own life, why certain patterns keep repeating despite your best intentions to change them. The shadow isn't just composed of the qualities society deems negative, your aggression, selfishness, or lustful impulses. It also contains your disowned power, creativity, and authentic desire that didn't fit the image you thought you needed to maintain. Think about it. How many times have you found yourself saying things you don't mean, making choices that sabotage your stated goals, or feeling inexplicably triggered by someone who hasn't actually done anything wrong? These are moments when your shadow is running the show. You wonder why certain people or situations affect you so deeply while others remain untouched by the same experiences. It's because those triggers touch unhealed wounds and unintegrated aspects of yourself that remain active beneath the surface. The truth is that the unconscious doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. Like water finding its way through cracks, it manifests in projections onto others, in dreams that disturb your sleep, in sudden mood shifts that seem to come from nowhere, and in the subtle ways you undermine your own happiness. When you don't know your shadow, you become its puppet. You project onto others what you cannot accept in yourself. You attract relationships that mirror your inner conflicts. You create circumstances that confirm your deepest fears about life and about yourself. Do you want to live authentically, free from these unconscious patterns? Then stop running from the unknown territories within. Stop pretending that you're only your presentable, polished parts. The path to authentic living isn't paved with more self-improvement projects aimed at fixing what you think is wrong with you. It begins with the radical acceptance of all that you are. The light and the shadow, the beautiful and the broken, the parts you proudly display, and those you've kept hidden even from yourself. This integration isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming whole. It's not achieved through perfecting yourself, but through embracing the perfect imperfection of your humanity. And this is where we'll continue next, exploring what true authenticity looks like beyond the masks, and why it doesn't come from armoring yourself against life, but from developing the courage to be fully present with all that is. Let's continue this journey together. Most people misunderstand what it means to be authentic. They confuse it with brutal honesty that disregards others' feelings, with impulsively acting on every emotion, or with a rigid commitment to being yourself, regardless of context. But authentic living is far more nuanced. It's not about the absence of social awareness or about never adapting to different situations. It happens through developing the courage to know yourself deeply and the willingness to be known by others, gradually, appropriately, and with discernment. When you begin this process, you may discover that what you thought was your authentic self was actually yet another constructed identity. Perhaps a reaction against expectations rather than a genuine expression of who you are. True authenticity emerges not from knowing exactly who you are at all times, but from your willingness to remain curious about yourself. to question your assumptions, to notice when you're acting from fear rather than freedom. This path requires immense courage, because it means facing the possibility that much of what you've built your identity around isn't truly yours. Your political views, religious beliefs, career choice, relationship patterns, how many of these reflect your authentic values versus what was expected or modeled for you? Kierkegaard described this awakening as a form of existential crisis, the vertigo that comes from recognizing that nothing external can tell you how to live. No authority, tradition, or social consensus can relieve you of the responsibility to choose your own meaning. This realization is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. It's terrifying because it removes the comfort of certainty and the ability to blame others for your choices. It's liberating because it returns to you the authorship of your life. As you walk this path of authenticity, you'll notice something surprising. You become less reactive to criticism and judgment. Not because you've developed thicker skin, but because you're no longer seeking universal approval. When your sense of self isn't dependent on others' perceptions, their opinions lose their power over you. You also become more compassionate toward yourself and others. Recognizing your own complexity and contradictions makes it impossible to maintain rigid judgments about how people should be. But this journey also brings a particular kind of solitude. Not because you'll be alone. In fact, authentic living typically attracts deeper connections, but because no one can walk your path for you or tell you what your truth should be. Many people abandon this journey when they encounter this existential solitude. They rush back to the comfort of conformity, to the safety of clear external guidelines for living. But if you've stayed with me this far, I suspect you're no longer satisfied with that kind of safety. You're ready for something more real, even if it's also more challenging. You're prepared to enter the transformative space where your relationship with suffering itself begins to change. And that's precisely what we'll explore next. How embracing discomfort rather than avoiding it becomes the counterintuitive path to freedom. Let's continue this exploration together. From childhood, you were likely taught that pain is something to be avoided at all costs. You learned that negative emotions are problems to be solved, that vulnerability is weakness, and that the goal of life is to maximize pleasure and minimize suffering. This conditioning created a fundamental misunderstanding, the belief that a good life is one without discomfort, and that freedom means freedom from pain. But what if this entire premise is flawed? What if your attempts to avoid suffering are actually the source of your deepest suffering? Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, discovered something profound in that extreme suffering. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. What Frankl understood was that suffering becomes transformative when we stop resisting it and instead relate to it differently. The pain itself isn't the problem. It's your relationship with pain that determines whether it destroys or develops you. When you run from discomfort, whether it's the discomfort of uncertainty, of vulnerability, of challenging emotions, or of facing hard truths, you create a life that's small and constrained. You make choices based not on what matters most to you, but on what feels safest in the moment. Over time, this avoidance creates a peculiar kind of suffering. The suffering of an unlived life, of potential unrealized, of connections never deepened, because they would require risking heartbreak. The most insidious aspect of this avoidance is that it's often unconscious and socially sanctioned. Our entire consumer culture is built around promising escape from discomfort through entertainment, substances, possessions, and endless distractions. But notice what happens when you constantly avoid the difficult emotions. They don't disappear. They go underground. They transform into chronic anxiety, depression, addictive behaviors, psychosomatic illness, or a pervasive sense of emptiness that no amount of external success can fill. The alternative isn't to seek suffering, but to develop what psychologists call emotional agility, the capacity to be with all of your feelings without being controlled by them. It's about creating enough internal space to experience even the most challenging emotions without losing yourself in them or needing to immediately escape them. This capacity doesn't develop through positive thinking or affirmations. It develops through practice, through deliberately staying present with discomfort when every instinct is telling you to run. When you learn to stay with feelings of rejection without spiraling into self-criticism, when you can experience fear without letting it determine your choices, when you can acknowledge envy without acting from it, you begin to discover a profound truth. Emotions themselves cannot harm you. It's your resistance to them that creates suffering. As meditation teacher Jungian Jung puts it, suffering, check, pain, x resistance. The pain of life is inevitable. The suffering we add through resistance is optional. This isn't just spiritual theory, it's supported by neuroscience. When you label emotions and allow yourself to feel them completely, the intensity actually diminishes more quickly than when you try to suppress or avoid them. The paradox is that by developing the courage to feel everything, you eventually become afraid of nothing. Not because difficult emotions stop arising, but because you no longer fear your own internal experience. You know from direct experience that you can survive heartbreak, failure, uncertainty, and loss. Not just survive, but potentially grow stronger and wiser through them. This is the heart of resilience, not an immunity to life's difficulties, but a hard-earned confidence in your ability to move through them without losing your center. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most important aspect of authentic living. The understanding that freedom is not found in controlling life's circumstances, but in cultivating an unshakable inner presence that remains steady regardless of external conditions. Let's conclude our journey by exploring what this kind of presence looks like and how to cultivate it. We've arrived at the final truth of authentic living, and it may be both the simplest and the most challenging to embody. The quality of your life is determined not by what happens to you, but by the quality of consciousness you bring to what happens. This isn't positive thinking or denial of life's genuine difficulties. It's the recognition that while you cannot control much of what occurs in your life or in the world, you always retain the freedom to choose how you relate to those occurrences. The psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl expressed this with haunting clarity. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This inner freedom doesn't mean you won't feel pain, grief, or anger when facing life's inevitable challenges. It means you won't be defined or diminished by these experiences. You'll move through them rather than becoming stuck in them. This capacity has been recognized across philosophical and spiritual traditions, from the Stoics' practice of amor fati, love of fate, to Buddhism's concept of equanimity. It's the ability to say yes to reality, as it is, before deciding how to respond to it. Most people spend their lives in resistance to what is. They exhaust themselves fighting against reality, against aging, against loss, against the fact that everything changes, that nothing is permanent, that much of life remains beyond our control. This resistance creates a particular kind of suffering, the suffering of arguing with reality and constantly losing. As philosopher and spiritual teacher Byron Katie puts it, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. The alternative isn't passive resignation. It's active acceptance, a clear-eyed recognition of what is, which paradoxically creates the space for genuine change where change is possible. When you stop wasting energy fighting against reality, you can direct that energy toward responding wisely and creating what is within your power to create. When you stop requiring life to be different before you can be at peace, you discover a peace that doesn't depend on external conditions. This is ultimate freedom, Not the freedom from limitations, pain, or mortality, but the freedom to live fully and authentically within these inescapable aspects of human existence. Cultivating this capacity isn't a one-time achievement, but a daily practice. It involves regularly pausing to notice your relationship to what's happening. Are you resisting, grasping, denying? Can you loosen your grip just a little and allow life to be as it is in this moment? It involves developing mindfulness, the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without automatically believing or acting on them. It involves practicing self-compassion when you inevitably get caught in old patterns of reactivity. And perhaps most importantly, it involves remembering that authenticity isn't perfection. It's the willingness to be a work in progress, to fall and get back up, to continually choose truth over comfort when they diverge. As you continue on this path, you'll notice that the small self, the ego that needs constant protection and validation, begins to recede, and something larger and more essential emerges. Call it your authentic self, your soul, or simply the awareness that witnesses it all without judgment. From this place, you'll still experience the full range of human emotions, but you'll no longer be tyrannized by them. You'll still face challenges, but you'll meet them from a place of groundedness rather than reactivity. You'll still care deeply about others, but your well-being won't depend on their approval. This is what it means to be unshakable. Not because nothing affects you, but because you've learned to hold it all with an open heart and steady presence. If this message has touched something deep within you, leave a comment saying, "I choose authenticity," and share one small step you're taking toward more authentic living. Let's create a community of people committed not to pretending to have it all figured out, but to walking this path of genuine growth together. And remember, the journey toward authentic living isn't linear. There will be steps forward and backward, moments of clarity and confusion. What matters isn't perfection, but presence and persistence. The next video in this series will explore practical tools for shadow work and emotional integration. Don't miss it. Authentic transformation requires both understanding and practice. I'll see you there.